And thank you for watching Libertarian Counterpoint. I am James Just, your host. This is Jason McPhee from the Knuckleheads of Liberty. Thank you, Jason, for being here tonight, and thank you for watching. All right, you're not... Jason, I can say your name. California infection is spreading across the country, right? We've seen in the last few years how things like AB5 and have just disrupted much of the culture and economy here in California. So what Biden's administration has decided to do, let's take that national. We're going to go and destroy the lives of gig workers and freelancers and independent artists, and so we can pat ourselves on the back and say we're doing something good, apparently. Do these people not actually just look at the results of what has happened here in California? I mean, as someone who was asked to run for office by gig workers over AB5, in 2020, and none of these people who support this kind of policies ever came and asked us what we want. I am skeptical of what these people are actually for, what they're actually trying to do here. You asked if they ever learn, and they will not learn unless you vote them out.
And sadly, in California, we cannot get these people voted out. Even when we do a successful, we put somebody successfully up for a recall, we still can't get them out. So I don't know, but yeah, it's terrible, the idea that these guys think that they can come in and make better decisions than you can over what kind of work and what kind of job works for you. I mean, the whole point of gig work is flexibility. And when you tell somebody that you can only work for this company if they make you a contracted employee, I guess
standard employee.
Standard employee, yeah. Then suddenly you don't have that flexibility anymore. And for a lot of people with gig work, it's like, oh, I've got maybe 16 hours this week I can devote to this thing. I don't, and maybe one week I have 40 hours I can devote to it. The point is that you have that flexibility, so it's what works for you. That's part of the deal.
That was part. Not only is the flexibility part of the deal, the flexibility is important for those who have issues that make a standard employment difficult, right? Like one of the ladies who I used to kind of work with when back in the day, we didn't work with people you bumped into on occasion. We both would go and collect scooters at night, right? Collect scooters, you take them home, you charge them, and you go deploy them in the morning. And the reason she did this is because she had a highly autistic son. And so when her son was having a good day, she could go off and she could work, and her sister could watch him. But when her son was having a bad day, she couldn't go off and work. She had to stay home. And so this allowed her to take control of her life. She didn't have to be dependent on a system. She didn't have to be dependent on a handout from the government. She could actually go out and control her own life. She was in control of her life, despite her problems. And now she can't. And they literally took that away from her because how can she can't have a regular schedule.
Yeah. Well, and it strikes me too that what is somebody who sets their own hours? I mean, generally we used to call that an entrepreneur, right? I mean, somebody who tries to figure out how to run their own business, how to figure out how to do things for themselves, and yet somehow we've got this government that's telling us that, no, don't worry, we'll figure it out for you, and you just get in line and take orders, and that's what we're about here.
Well, it's interesting because back when I did it, you'd spend 30 hours working and 10 hours about a week managing that 30 hours of work. So you did work a 40-hour week. You could work about a 40-hour week, and it was about 1 to 4. 1 to 3 to 1, 3 to 1, how many hours, 4 to 1, something like that, hours of management versus hours of actually working. Because you have to go, are you working at Amazon today, or are you working for Uber? Are you delivering food? Mm-hmm. Or maybe you've got a political consulting gig this day, right? You don't know because you've got, you got different pockets, different buckets, different tasks that you're doing. And so much of this policy is the simplistic thinking of a wage worker, of a single wage worker, where you get up, you go, you do it. It makes you wonder what we actually learned in school. You get up, you go to your place, you do what the person at the front of the room tells you, you sit down, shut up, do what the person at the front of the room tells you, and then go home, you eat, sleep, and come back and do it again the next day.
Yeah. I mean, government education is just about essentially making people who are capable of following orders. And sadly, I don't even know if it's doing a good job at that anymore.
Well, clearly it's not. If you look at the cultural decay that we're going on, they're not even accomplishing that. But that's essentially what I learned in school was you sit down, you shut up, and you listen to the person in the front of the room, which is probably why I didn't go to school very often. You know, I graduated back in the day when you were allowed to do this. You can graduate high school with half, you know, being gone half the time. They didn't care. Can you pass the test? Great, you're fine. You know, can you pass the test and you causing any problems? Yes, you can pass the test. No, you're not causing any problems. We're fine. Now nowadays, you miss 3 days in a semester, and they're calling your parents and stuff because they're more interested in the money than your education. Yeah.
Incentives matter. Unfortunately, the politicians can't figure that out.
Yeah, and you know, the little voice in my ear tells me how much of this is actually tied to school lunch money. You know, how much of this is actually from federal school lunch money is why they want you in that seat so often is school lunches. So, and we're talking lunches. California businesses are preparing for a $20 fast food wage by trimming hours, cutting employees, and raising prices. Imagine that. You know, all costs are paid by the end consumer. And who's the end consumer? It's either the person who pays the prices, or it's the lowest wage worker who's going to lose their job because they're no longer a valuable employee, a viable employee. They're not. It's not that they're not viable. It's that the tasks that they do don't add up to that much. The amount that they're being forced to pay, right?
Yeah. Well, you know, it's just it's this facade of generosity by politicians. You know, they act like if they make an edict that certain people will make more money, then somehow magically everybody will be more prosperous. But that's just not so. You know, they're not creating prosperity. They're literally just simply raising the prices on things, which, you know, when you try to artificially do that, you send all kinds of bad signals through the economy and all kinds of chaos. And the chaos here is that you're literally setting a bar for a worker that if they are not making $20 worth of product, $20 worth of productivity, then they're not going to have a job. So that's...
You're raising that first rung of the ladder, of the economic ladder. You're raising that. And so you're actually making it harder for people who are outside of the economic system to get on the regular economic ladder. Yeah. They're doing the exact opposite of what they claim. And it is such a common occurrence here in California that how we have allowed it, how we have a culture, how we as a society have allowed this to kind of spread beyond this is actually kind of amazing. The fact that anybody can take this seriously after seeing California, New York, Illinois, those places who have followed these policies, they're all disasters.
Yeah. Well, and the sad thing is, I mean, ultimately, you're worth in the marketplace what you produce, and you know there is no facade that's going to change that. You're just simply going to break the system if you wind up trying to create you know, these illusory types of standards for how much somebody should be paid for a certain amount of work. And you know, the biggest thing that it kind of debunks this whole idea of you know, these people having to make a certain amount of dollars that has to be determined by a politician instead of, you know, the marketplace, is think about how many people are willing to do a free internship. You know, I mean, when you're just starting out, it's those skills that you as a prospective employee want to get that are super valuable to you, so you can get your foot in the door, gain the skills to prove to everybody that you're worth more, and then get hired for more. Everybody intuitively used to understand that, you know, that sometimes it was worth, you know, giving a little of your time to gain the skills to earn more money, and that's exactly what internships used to be about.
Yeah, because you were being paid in skills.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Your compensation was, I now know how to do things when before I didn't, and you know. Are they going to stop at this? Because California has already now mandated, they've mandated a $20 minimum wage for fast food workers. They've mandated minimum wages for healthcare workers. Well, where are they going to stop? We know this is California Democrats. They never stop. So what's the next industry they're going to pick on? Are they going to pick on truck drivers? Are they going to pick on, you know, who else are they going to pick on?
Yeah. Anybody that they think they can generate some votes with, I guess.
Yeah. So it's the question. And here's the other thing. If the government is now essentially negotiating your contract for you, what do you need a union for?
Yeah.
I mean, essentially, the unions pay for all this stuff, but why do the unions are actually taking out their reason of existence. If a union comes to me and goes, well, we can raise your wages through negotiation, but I don't need to because the government's mandating bigger wages. I don't need you to negotiate wages for me. Quite frankly, you're bad at it, and I could get a better wage on my own. But even if I wasn't good at negotiating my own salary, why do I need to pay you money to do something that these goofy politicians are allegedly doing for me anyway? There's just no way. I'm doing it again, Jason. These people don't think things through before they follow these things.
The sad thing is too, you can literally see examples of this playing out every day in life with things like pro sports, right? I mean, you see that people are generally paid more because they literally demonstrate that they have more skills, so they get offered a bigger contract when they show they can put more people in the seats. And the same thing goes with a lot of performers as well. If your show does better, you're putting more people in the seats, you get paid more.
And sometimes those contracts don't pay out, right? Sometimes they're wrong, but the business has to pay it anyway. But at least the business made that choice, right? It wasn't forced upon them by somebody else. Now we're talking about the evils of kind of government intervention, but Richard has we'll call it a rant on the lesser of two evils when you're voting. So let's hear what Richard Fields has to say this week about voting for evil.
This is Richard Fields with Report from the Fields. It's a truism among hardcore libertarians. I'm going to start that over again. Hardcore. This is Richard Fields with Report from the Fields. It's a truism among hardcore libertarians that voting for the lesser of two evils results in, well, evil. We just watched Republicans select arguably the most evil of the Republican contenders, Donald J. Trump, with 51% of the vote compared to distant second place winner Ron DeSantis, who lagged by 30 points. Nikki Haley, who for different reasons is probably equally evil to Trump, came in third. Pundits speculate that a good chunk of her votes came from Democrats. Why would Democrats vote in a Republican primary, you ask? Well, because the Democratic Party bosses decided to skip the caucuses in favor of mail-in ballots in deference to the supporters of Joe Biden, who want to make sure that the first primary that counts is South Carolina, deemed friendly to Biden. So much for saving our democracy. Why is Trump evil? He's a loudmouth, nativist who opposes almost all immigration, despite the fact that his most recent wife and her extended family are all immigrants. His anti-immigration stance is a blatant populist appeal to white working-class voters who incorrectly blame their economic woes on competition from Mexican laborers. Trump extends his tribalist nativism to trade, opposing trade with any foreign country that he, in his ignorant opinion, considers unfair. In his first term, he appointed judges who ruled against abortion rights. Regardless of your opinion on abortion, striking down Roe v. Wade has made it much more difficult for Republicans to get elected in most of the country. And we must remember that the lockdowns and forced COVID vaccination edicts all started under Trump's watch. In the process, he presided over the biggest deficit spending and money printing binge in the history of the Republic up to his time. Forget about his amorality in dealing with women, his unwillingness to let go of an election that the Democrats stole fair and square, while his whiny complaints about how the media treats him. Trump is in a second term would do more harm to the economy, crippling nonsense in a second term than he did in his first term, which is saying a lot. He's evil. Biden is just a different flavor of evil. He's corrupt. He openly bragged about threatening to cut off aid to Ukraine unless a prosecutor going after the gas company Burisma was fired. Coincidentally, his son, Hunter, was on the board of Burisma. He's fully on board with implementing draconian policies to theoretically stop global warming and appease the climate-changing Malthusian hysterics. full implementation of his policies have the potential of dragging the economy and indeed civilization itself into a grinding downward spiral. For all his posturing about saving democracy, he's the guy who refused Secret Service protection to the only significant primary competitor in the Democratic Party, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., whose father and uncle were both assassinated. He's the guy who canceled the Iowa caucuses, see above, and is trying to stop the New Hampshire primary to make sure that the first primary contest is Biden-friendly South Carolina. He extended Trump's ludicrous and economically disastrous COVID lockdowns and vaccination mandates and the federal spending and money printing spree that went along with it. He directly interfered with peace negotiations between Ukraine and Russia, leading to the war, which Ukraine is losing despite billions in munitions being provided by American taxpayers to Ukraine. If the report from the only credible reporter on the subject, Seymour Hersh, is to be believed, he is behind blowing up the Nord Stream pipeline, a direct act of war against Russia. He's bombing the Houthis in Yemen without a declaration of war. And really, who knows if the brain behind these disastrous policies is Biden's or the former Obama staffers who are probably running the show from behind the scenes. Biden is pretty clearly senile and not in the early stages anymore. And like Trump, forget about his amorality, hair sniffing of little girls and showering with his teenage daughter. The guy is evil. So if both the Democratic and Republican candidates for president in 2024 are evil, what's a voter to do? One choice is to ignore our corrupt political system as much as possible. The problem is they don't ignore us. Another choice is to take a look at the winner of the Libertarian Iowa caucuses. That would be Chase Oliver, who won with a resounding 51% against 49% against 9 other candidates. Oliver is the former LP candidate for the U.S. Senate in Georgia. With a war chest of all of $7,790, he got enough votes to force Georgia's Senate election into a runoff in 2020. He ran on a slogan of armed and gay, appealing to both conservatives-leaning and liberal-leaning libertarians. Of course, all caucus and primary voting for LP candidates is non-binding. The actual LP candidate will be picked at convention the weekend of May 24th. But despite the internal dysfunction of the national LP, the ultimate LP candidate will most likely be good, not evil. Voting for good is always better than voting for evil. I'm Richard Fields with Report from the Fields. See you next week.
All right. Thank you, Richard. You know, that's the manipulation of elections can happen in many, many ways, right? It's not the obvious election manipulation that people like Trump and his crowd are complaining about that actually manipulates elections. It's these little things where they remove your choices early on. And, you know, if you don't have the choice or the right to make your choices early on, if you don't have the right to make your voice heard early on in the process, then you don't have, your voice isn't really heard later on in the process. You're not choosing between people you want, you're choosing between people you've been, you know, told you can choose between. There's a difference. And that manipulation of the process is something that needs to be looked at, you know, not by politicians, by us as individuals, as citizens. You know, that's something we need to pay more attention to.
Yeah, but you know, there's something that goes a little deeper than that, than just the candidates, and that's that, you know, a lot of people imagine that democracy is this, you know, wonderful thing, and we've been taught in school that, hey, you know, we should, you know, just vote on everything. And the idea is that, you know, actually in reality, you should leave most of the stuff to the market, and we should have a very narrow set of stuff that we're voting for in government, because when you think about it, just like you're saying with the candidates, well, okay, who decides who's on the ballot, right? Well, who decides what you get to vote on, too? You know, if you're going to have some vote for, gosh, well, you know, maybe there's some ballot initiative or something else. It's like,
pick a $20 an hour minimum wage for for workers. You vote on that, and it wins with 52% of the vote.
Yeah.
Well, is that really the voters speaking? Well, no, a little over half the voters have spoken, and a little under half the voters have also spoken. But now you're going to go for what the little over half is because they've won. Well, yeah, but they don't have support, right? You don't have widespread support.
But what about all the other things you didn't get to vote on, right? That are sort of happening to you through government, right? It's sort of like, you know, just what you even get to vote on and how often and how coarse those choices are. You know, it's so much better if you just get to vote every day with your dollars in a marketplace, right? Because you make change immediately instead of waiting for somebody to put on the issue that you're interested in.
And there's more ways. Voting with your dollars, your time, your attention. There's lots of ways in the marketplace where you can vote. It's not just your dollars. You can vote with your time and your attention.
Yeah, exactly.
So there's, and we're talking about voting. The Iowa caucus aftermath. The Iowa caucus has happened. You know, Trump won with, I forget the final, over 50%. What was it? Haley had 20.
It was like Godzilla versus a couple of the lesser monsters.
Haley had 20. DeSantis had like 20%. They were roughly about the same, and then Trump was like at 50%, 51% is when last time I saw it, which was kind of known, right? It wasn't like nobody was surprised about that. You know, I was kind of surprised that the Vivek Ramaswamy, is that how you pronounce his name?
Vivek Ramaswamy, and he
didn't do as well.
Stepped out too.
He's already stepped out. Yeah, I was surprised he didn't do as well, but I suppose a lot of his audience is probably Trump's audience as well. Is the soft Trump supporters are kind of the people who would, if Trump wasn't there, they would have gone to him. Yeah. And so I think it's bad timing in a sense.
Well, I very much appreciated the way Vivek Ramaswamy ran his campaign in the sense that he went on every podcast that would have him. He essentially talked to everybody. He was on Charlemagne the God, I believe. He was on just anybody who, you know, hostile or friendly. He was on their show. In fact, he even got Don Lemon fired at CNN because he was on that show. And him and Don Lemon started arguing about race. And then Don Lemon got the boot not too long afterwards. So yeah, it's just a wonderful way that he was so open to discussing things. But the problem was he set everything up so he was essentially Trump's shadow. I mean, he was essentially saying
he was. I wouldn't call him Trump's shadow, but the popular perception would be that he was a soft Trump. Mm-hmm. You know, he was Trump without the hard edges, which, you know, if you're a Republican and that's actually might not be a bad thing, right? Trump someone who has the policies similar to that you would like, but can actually sell them and have a rational discussion with people who disagree with them. You know, I don't know if I was a Republican, but I guess that's why I'm not a Republican, Jason. Because I'm not one. I don't care about owning the libs. And I think so much of the Trump supporters, they're just so tired of being pushed around by culture that Trump is their pushback to that. And as disastrous as that may be, I can talk today. I swear to God. I can understand the perspective.
Yeah, I think the appeal of Trump is that it's not so much the principles, it's just watching somebody who was willing to smash the Democrats back in the mouth. I mean, that's really
able to, because a lot of people try, but they get intimidated by the media and whatnot, and Trump doesn't seem to care about the media pushback. There is something about Trump who is able to kind of, I don't know if it's not care. It doesn't impact him the way it impacts other people. Like DeSantis, can't pull it off. No one else has been able to pull off kind of pushing back against the left the way Trump has, for whatever reason. Yeah. Now, I'm not happy about it either, but I can understand the appeal to that. This is the only guy who's been able to have any success at pushing back.
And DeSantis had some success, but it just seemed to be limited to Florida. Once he came out of Florida, nobody seemed to care or remember. But it's just because of the shadow of Trump.
Well, actually, that's easy. Because unlike Ramaswamy, who you could say has similar policies to Trump, but has a different approach. If you're just trying to be Trump light, why go to DeSantis if you've got Trump to vote for? Why? It's like the lesser Trump, a less strong Trump. Why would you do it? It doesn't make any sense. Now, if Trump wasn't there, DeSantis may look more appealing. I think it would be would probably end up being a thing. All right, we've got a couple minutes. The Supreme Court appeals ready to deal another blow to the federal agency's administrative power. We brought this up next week, so we'll talk about this
into the future.
Let's see if I get this one. We talk this a little bit next week, but the Supreme Court is, Richard talks about it next week on the Chevron defense, but the Supreme Court is looking like they might, at some level, kind of start restricting some of these abusive powers that the government agencies have, where they just kind of write rules on their own and then adjudicate these rules on their own without even Congress oversight or the court's oversight. And I think that's what they're deciding is how much deference do these agencies get?
Yeah, and this is the sort of Seventh Amendment issue that we'll be talking a little bit about next week as well. But, sort of an inside joke into the future here. But you just tune in next week and you'll see.
You'll see what the heck we're talking about.
But the issue is that, you know, a lot of these administrative, a lot of these agencies will essentially have administrative judges that make the decisions within the agency. So it's sort of like people who are employed by the federal government, you're being charged by the federal government with having done something wrong, violated a rule, and then those same agencies, if you want to appeal it, are essentially then, well, okay, sure, we'll hear that, and no, we agree with the other people who work for our agency as well.
And we're only going to listen to our experts. Your experts don't count.
Yeah.
It's another way they do it, right?
Yeah.
It's your experts. They give a deference to their experts, rather than, hey, let's listen to a wide range of experts and kind of listen to the disagreements and make a rational decision like we would think would be a rational decision. They choose the experts that the government bureaucracy chooses, which of course the government bureaucracy is going to choose the experts who tell them that they want to do.
But in this particular case, it's just about the right to go out and have a neutral jury trial, essentially. So the idea is you get a bunch of your peers to decide, hey, did the government decide right in this charge that they made? So essentially, if it's a charge over $20 back when this was first established, now it's about $300 and something if you account for inflation. If the government's charging you with something like that, should you have the right to a jury trial?
And I always remember the 10th Amendment does exist. I just want to say it out there. Thank you for being with us. Thank you, Jason, for coming down here with me tonight. Thank you for watching. Thank everybody in there for reading, for working very hard. And please remember to love everybody. Good night.